So in part one of this video, we looked at the site of sperm production, which was the testis. And so now we're going to continue our journey and see what happens to that sperm once it is generated. So the next structure is the epididymis. The epididymis is this kind of reddish looking structure right here. Epididymis. It's this coiled mass of tubes above each testis. This is where the sperm mature. So they can stay here for I think it's like 60 to 70 days even. They get their flagella here, and they're basically just stored in the epididymis until ejaculation when they are released. The structure is just more of that coiled tubing. So 20 feet of tubing coiled into 1.5 inches, and 4 to 6 weeks for sperm to travel through it. What did I say? 60 days? That was close. Anyway, yeah, so the sperm in the seminiferous tubules is produced and then eventually ends up in the epididymis, and then it is stored there. At the point of ejaculation, the sperm is actually going to be released. And so the next structure is the vas deferens. And the vas deferens is this tube. You can see it coming from the epididymis and then coming all the way up and around until it merges with the urethra. So here's the bladder that we learned about in the urinary system. Here's the urethra, which comes out through the penis. And you can see that the vas deferens merges with the urethra right in this location. So it's this tubing that transports the sperm from the testes to the urethra during ejaculation. Now, you might wonder, well, why do they take such a roundabout pathway? It seems like they could just kind of come up, merge, and go out. Why do we do this big up and over the hip bone here? What's going on? Well, the answer is actually it comes from evolution. So, humans ultimately came from simpler animals, and one of the simpler animals that is related to us quite distantly is a shark. So in green, you can see the shark testes, and it's actually located in the chest region. And then in humans, of course, the testes are here. Well, what's happened is over the course of evolutionary time, the testes have descended and they've gotten lower and lower and lower. And when they lowered, they actually went on the wrong side of the pelvic bone. They descended, it used to be that there was this long route up to the chest cavity, but then when they descended, they kind of went down, but on the wrong side of the pelvic bone. And so it kind of had to go up and over and around, and that's why we have this weird up, over, and around thing, which is kind of interesting. Sorry about that blurry picture. It was the best one I could find. That then leaves us to the urethra. So the urethra is that tube used by sperm to exit the body, and this is a shared tube. So both sperm and urine exit through this tube. So to recap, sperm is produced in the testes, stored in the epididymis. During ejaculation, it then travels through the vas deferens and then out through the urethra. I should also point out that there is sometimes confusion between the epididymis and the urethra, but keep in mind there's a vas deferens between those two structures. That was, yeah, okay, I'm sure you're chuckling. Okay, and then here's just another diagram that shows the same thing. So what happens if a man doesn't want sperm to exit his body anymore? Maybe he's already had children in his life and he doesn't want any more children. No offense to you, but you guys are expensive, and so maybe we don't want any more children. Well, you may have heard of a vasectomy. And a vasectomy is a procedure. It's used to permanently sterilize a man by cutting the vas deferens, and that prevents the release of sperm. So vasectomy cuts the vas deferens. And what they do, it's actually a fairly simple procedure. They make a small incision beneath the penis, and they pull out the vas deferens, and they go snippety snip. And I'm pretty sure this is the device they use to do that. I'm not entirely sure. And then they have to do something with those ends. So if they just let the ends dangle, sperm could theoretically, exit one and manage to get through this area and into another. So there's various methods they use. They can tie them, they can cauterize them, which is basically like they heat seal it. They can put little plastic caps on there, but they need to do something to make sure that they stay shut. And then boom, the sperm can no longer enter through. Now, I said it's permanently sterilizing a man. This procedure can be reversed, but it's not a guarantee. So generally, if someone is about to get a vasectomy, the doctor will discuss with them, are you positive this is what you want to do? It's kind of generally meant to be um, uh, permanent thing. Um, so then you might wonder, well, what happens to that sperm then in the testes? And what happens is they die. The sperm cells die in there, and then the immune cells just kind of break them down and go away. So the sperm never able to get through, and then boom, he can no longer have any children. Now, after a vasectomy, does a man still release fluid during ejaculation? The answer is yes. In fact, the ejaculate is not that much different from before. And so how can that be? What's going on? Well, it turns out that there's other things that are released with the sperm that we need to talk about. So semen consists of sperm plus additional fluids. In a vasectomy, only the sperm is prevented from exiting. So everything else from the semen still is released from the body. It's just that sperm that's held back. So what are these other structures? Well, these structures are called accessory glands, and just like in the digestive system, they add material that helps the sperm, but the sperm doesn't like pass through these structures. And so there's three main ones: the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and then Cowper's gland, or now it's called the bulbourethral gland. Cowper was a person, and we're kind of getting away from naming things after people that discovered them. So this little green part of the pie chart, that is what's contributed by the testes. So only 2 to 5% of semen is actually sperm from the testes. So this little part is no longer present after a vasectomy, but all of the rest is. So what are these structures that are adding additional fluid? First is the seminal vesicle. Here's a picture of it right here. And you can see it releases material into the vas deferens right here. And you can see this adds the majority of material. It adds fructose, which is sugar used by the sperm for energy so that they can swim to the egg. It adds enzymes that help prepare the sperm for fertilization. It actually adds a hormone that causes contractions in the female reproductive tract, which is interesting. So here's a hormone produced by a male, but that acts on the female reproductive tract. And it helps those muscle contractions in the female reproductive tract help propel the sperm through it so that the sperm can get where it's supposed to go. The prostate gland is another one. We've talked about this a little bit in the context of the urinary system. We said it added a base. Oh no, we didn't say that. Did we say that? I don't know. It wraps around the urethra. I'll tell you now. Its job is to add a base, and it adds a base to neutralize any acidic urine in the urethra. So urine is acidic, and if the sperm are released, any like little bits of trace amounts of urine in that tube is going to be acidic and can harm the sperm. So by adding this base, that neutralizes that and makes sure that the sperm doesn't get harmed by that acidity. And so we talked about how that prostate gland can enlarge and cause problems constricting the urethra. The bulbourethral gland adds a lubricating fluid before ejaculation. So here it is, again, formerly known as Cowper's gland. And this one's a little unique because the fluid is released before ejaculation. And that's kind of an interesting one to be aware of. There is a method of birth control called the withdrawal method. And I'll put birth control in quotes here because it's not exactly the best. And the idea is a couple begins to have intercourse, but then before ejaculation, the male withdraws the penis. And the theory is if ejaculation doesn't happen inside the female body, then no sperm enters the female body and she's not going to get pregnant. Turns out this isn't very effective. One study found that of every 100 women whose partners use withdrawal, 4 will become pregnant each year if they always do it correctly. That's kind of a big number, 4 out of 100. And the reason why is because that bulbourethral gland is releasing fluid before ejaculation. The male can't feel that. He doesn't know that's happening. And so, if there are some sperm in this tube from prior ejaculations, which is oftentimes the case, then that fluid can sweep some of that sperm out and result in a small but real chance of pregnancy. Now, the real danger of the withdrawal method, though, is that 27 will become pregnant out of 100 if they don't always do it correctly. And that's the real risk is, the withdrawal method sort of depends on the male actually following through with the withdrawal part and sometimes the male doesn't. And so something to be aware of that this withdrawal method is not the best method. So again, the male reproductive system, you can now see, I'll do it on this diagram. Testes is where the sperm is produced, stored in the epididymis, travel up to the vas deferens, and then out through the urethra. Along the way, the seminal vesicles add some fluids, the prostate gland adds the base, and then prior to ejaculation, that bulbourethral gland is releasing lubricating fluids as well. So that's it for the male reproductive system.